Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to our April Titans of the Toll Road event. Appreciate everyone starting their day with us. We're looking forward to a fantastic program here to round out your morning. Today we've got a great discussion today. We're excited to have cybersecurity experts on today's panel that'll provide an overview on our current threat landscape and how to protect your business. We'll have great information that they're going to share, and we'll also have some time for Q&A at the conclusion of the panel discussion. At this time, I'd like to introduce our executive sponsor, who will introduce our panel moderator. Joey Musmar is the founder and managing partner of Miller Musmar CPAs, a longtime friend of the Chamber, serves as the current treasurer to our board of directors, so we're very proud to introduce Joey Musmar, Miller Musmar CPAs.
Thank you so much, Charles. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here with you all today. It's my pleasure to introduce today today's moderator, Austin Adams. He's the Director of Delivery and Technology Partners at Google Public Sector. He previously held positions with Amazon Web Services, Alfresco, Microsoft, and among others. He's a proud alumni of James Madison University and a board member for their School of Political Science. Please help me welcome Austin.
Thank you. Well, welcome to Google, and thank you for attending today's event. I'm going to get right to bringing our incredible panel up. If you guys don't mind coming on up. You're going to hear today from some of the leading minds in cybersecurity, which is a topic, among others, that can be very confusing, complex, but also extremely perilous. There's a lot of news around cybersecurity for obvious reasons today. And it applies, as mentioned in the lead up, to both small businesses, medium businesses, companies like Google, but then, of course, our federal government. And given our location and closeness to the Beltway here, a lot of interesting news, including up to in the last few weeks, that I think this panel is going to be a really interesting sounding board and have interesting ideas and thoughts and feedback for you on things that you might be able to do tangibly, but also what's going on in the industry today. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm not going to do the one-by-one intros. I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves as they answer their first question. So we'll go ahead and get started. Cybersecurity is a very difficult industry to understand how to break into. I would doubt, and I'm going to start off with a poll. Who here actually went to undergrad for cybersecurity? Oh yeah. Did anybody go to a master's degree in cybersecurity?
It wasn't called that when I went for it.
Okay, oh, that's very good, very good. So as you can see, this isn't necessarily an industry that you go and get a formal education for. Though that being said, there are amazing institutions like James Madison University that are breaking into helping people get into it at undergrad. So that being said, I'm really interested in people's origin stories so they can personalize this panel. And then I'm going to have them talk about how they're helping other people break into the industry. So why don't we start with Nicole? Do you want to start with telling us about your origin story as well as how you're helping people get into the industry?
Yeah.
Flip it on for me. There you go.
There we go. Can you hear me? Hello, everybody. My name is Nicole Montgomery. I am with Accenture Federal Services. I remember in the 11th grade arguing with my mother. And I was like, Mom, I think I should take a typing class. I think computers are going to be around for a while. And she was like, no, you don't need to take typing because you don't need to be an admin assistant. Like, I want you to do great. So we settled on she allowing me to take a typing class, but the trade-off was I also had to take an engineering class. And that's kind of how I ended up at Virginia Tech. I ended up graduating with an accounting and information systems degree, and it has paved the way for me to be able to do lots of things. If you know accounting, you know that it kind of aligns when it comes to audit to our governance, risk, and compliance work that we do. And so I've been able to move from, auditing financial statements all the way to now auditing the systems of those financial statements to get companies and agencies ready for audit readiness, right? When it comes to how I help people, I like to do lots of things like this, right? So the big thing, this afternoon actually, I'm going to go hang out with a group of 3rd to 5th grade students, and they're all women. They're all young ladies, and we're going to introduce what STEM means to them, right? And then most importantly, just like me, I'm going to help them understand that you don't have to be all the way technical to be a part of our technical field, right? We can use all different kinds of people within the technical field. And then currently in my role as the cyber operations lead, I get the ability to recruit from different and non-expected areas, right? And so post George Floyd, what that looked like was, hey, let's go to Virginia Tech, but let's also go to Howard University. Let's go to James Madison, but let's also go to Hampton University, and let's go to NSBE, and let's go to these different places where we weren't going before to make sure that we're increasing the diversity, because we all know that diversity of people leads to diversity of thought, and just straight bottom line, like you're gonna increase your bottom line, so. That's a little bit about me. Yep.
Thank you for that. JD, how did you get into cybersecurity? How does this amazing career start?
Well, Austin, I dreamt about being a cybersecurity professional since I was a young child. You know, it's funny, like we over at Mandiant, before we became Google Public Sector, one of our best incident responders who was giving us all a presentation on how they took down this ransomware group. And then, and I said, man, he's got to be real technical. And so afterwards I was talking to him, and he was an anthropology major. And, and you know, so I kind of came into it very similar. I went to West Point. I was the first 10 years of my government career, I was an Apache aviator. I went into an Intel track for my last 10 years. I went to graduate school, went to Harvard for a Russian degree, and I used my Russian and Intel, and I was just an operator, and I really didn't know much about IT other than I knew how to use it, and I was thankful that we had tools, but I wasn't in the in this field at all. So I moved out into industry. I went to a company where one of my buddies was financing a company, and they built these micro SD chips that encrypted communications. Now that's kind of in line with what I was doing. I still didn't know what cyber was. And it was a real interesting progression through that company for about 2 years. And then I started working a lot with the FireEye team up at Fort Meade doing a bunch of projects. And I started to understand their methodology and thought process behind all that. And then they wanted me to come over and work with them, and so in 2015 I went over to FireEye, and I tell you, I still to this day learn good things every day about this profession, and you just have a real admiration for all the folks that have done this since day one, and they are just 100% devoted to this field, and that's now you see it where the young people coming up are getting, from the military perspective, they're getting commissioned into the cyber branch. They are studying cyber from high school forward. They are now putting together clusters of specialties to go and attack the full spectrum of challenges in the cyberspace. So we have really awakened to this challenge, and it's taken a bunch of older folks like me who have done a crash course over the last probably 10, 12 years in this field. But I think that you look at where we're going to be 20 years from now, and I love taking STEM to really areas where we probably don't have much of a STEM program, broadening the applicability to a much larger demographic. And we're going to be in a much better footing for this fight 10 years from now, 15 years from now. In addition to, you're seeing a lot of the progress year after year after year. We're getting dwell times coming down. We're getting ahead of the attacker. So it's really interesting. But I think it's a common thread. Most of us older folks in the business now, we didn't even know how to spell cyber 10, 15 years ago. And it's out of necessity that we're all in this field.
I love it. All right, over to this side. Steve. I'm sure you also flew Apache helicopters on your way to getting into cyber. So I'll turn it over to you to talk about your origin story of flying heavy aircraft.
Funny story on that one. I was telling somebody what I did, And they're like, oh, that sounds really cool. And I'm like, what do you do? And he's like, I'm a fire control officer and a Warthog. I'm like, yeah, my job sounds cool. So I did go to undergrad. It was not called cyber back then. Cyber didn't exist. It wasn't even InfoSec yet, right? This has had many names over the years. It was just straight computer security. So I went to get a degree in economic crime investigation. And you could either do a financial route, like auditing, forensics accounting, things like that, or a computer side. And if the Ben Affleck accounting movie had been out back then, I might have gone a different way. But since it wasn't out, I thought the computer side looked kind of cool. And I went into that, and I spent some time in commercial, and then about 15 years ago, one of my friends told me, Mantech does some cool stuff. You might want to come work with me there, and I did, and I've gotten to do some cool stuff there. And so we also do some cool things as far as trying to reach out into the communities and find and enable different pathways for people to get into the right? It is a hard area to get into, and there's a lot of different, it's not a clear pathway for anybody, right? You can't tell them just go do these things and you'll be a good cyber person. So we work with the Commonwealth in a number of ways. So we work with the Commonwealth Cyber Initiative, giving high school students internships. We actually partner with Academies of Loudoun with a program we call Defend, which is bringing people in and introducing them to our forensics capability and then working to get them cleared so they can go help out government customers. And we also participate in the GEM Fellowship Program, which looks at ways to help underrepresented communities get into master's and graduate level programs in these types of areas to enable more pathways. And then, well, lastly, we work on the policy side, right? So we like to talk to government policymakers and try and bring up points like, hey, not everybody needs a 4-year degree to do this. So how do we get community college routes? And if you get the community college route, it reduces the cost and opens up way more pathways for people to get into the track to come out and do that. And then the last would be like mentorship, right? So how do we get out in the community and talk to students to let them realize, like you were saying, that it's not all technical, right? There's many different aspects to cyber, and having that different way of looking at things is often very helpful for finding new solutions to the problem. So that's kind of a lot of the ways that Mantech tries to get out into the community and enable new pathways.
That's awesome, Steve. What do you do at Mantech?
So I'm lucky in that I get to be our kind of cyber lead. Technically, I think my title now is just changed like a week ago. It's like Vice President of Security Engineering and Cognitive Cyber. The real focus is the cognitive cyber aspect. So how do we enable machine and human-assisted pathways? So how does the machine help humans? How do humans use the machine better? And how do we use them at what they're best at each so we can free up resources to go tackle the higher level problems? So we're doing a lot of that to try and find capability development. So we're bringing that into our capability development shop. I run our cyber capability development portfolio, looking at kind of that 18 month out gap and how do we create new things that are going to help our customers.
You didn't mention helicopters once in your answer.
Yeah, I'm not. So obviously I wasn't a pilot because that would have been what I led off with. But, yeah.
Very good. All right, Kyle, we'll go over to you. How did you get into the industry?
That's great. Well, like everybody else, I didn't start out with cyber as my intent. It sort of found me. So from a young age, I've really enjoyed problem solving. I really like creating things to help people, and I like making people laugh. And so throughout school, there was always some really great things to take a look at the networks, make it so that kids can install games totally during homeroom and stuff like that. And it kind of just encroached me in the culture of thinking about technology as a way to help people, bring joy, et cetera, and then think about the way that we deliver technology in a way that we have to think about how we provide the services around it. It was neat moving from a very small town, Craig, Colorado, to Laramie, Wyoming for my undergrad with the University of Wyoming. I was able to do an electrical engineering degree and physics degree, which also kind of led to the same idea of solving problems together. We launched a tech incubator where we brought in small businesses so that we can grow these napkin sketch good ideas into viable businesses. And from there, we launched into the Air Force, which was an amazing journey. So 13 years Air Force. I started out as an electronics engineer, right, which is essentially a soldering guy, working on automated test equipment. And it sounds like the least exciting job, but I'll tell you, it was one of the most rewarding because we ended up starting as the first engineer launching a brand new workload that supported Kadena Air Force Base. I had no idea what that was when I first joined Air Force as a civilian, but it was very diverse. We ended up reverse engineering C-130s to extend their service life, A-10s, B-2s, B-1Bs, nuclear reentry vehicles.
You're checking all the boxes here.
It's
my
amazing.
friend.
No flying of helicopters though, right?
Yeah, I think you might have one up the helicopter story.
No. We just, I mean, the coolest thing I would say Air Force side that I got to do is we did get to work on the A-10's main gun. And I redesigned the system that was the ammo counter for it. And I'll tell you, that gun is fearsome even without firing, just spinning on the ground. It's one of the kind of most arm-tickling things I've done. And then let's see, to round it out, I was fortunate in that I was brought in on the ground floor of the Sentinel ICBM system. So this is the Minuteman III modernization program. I was employee number 14 or so, brought over as the software lab guy. And I ended up sort of really leading the MBSE cyber footprint and cyber footprint for that $95 billion program. And during that, I was extremely fortunate to interact with some of the brightest minds in software and cyber, learning how to defend against nation-state actors and one of the most critical infrastructure that the U.S. maintains. And then most recently, I've now moved over to SOCI as the CTO, where it's been taking that knowledge from all of that Air Force experience and now expanding across Fed services, ensuring that we're helping U.S. immigrants at the U.S. border to expedite through the system, helping share data safely with U.S. partners through MPE, working with Intel partners through data analysis work, things like that.
That's awesome. Well, I'm going to segue off of all the DoD talk, because you can see the Department of Defense has played a role, at least in the origin stories of a couple folks here, and talk about something that's in the news just recently. So you may have heard about a Massachusetts Air Guardsman being involved in literally taking pictures of classified information, evidently from his parents' house, and then putting those all over the internet and making massive news around potentially divulging all sorts of important secrets about Ukraine and our efforts across the globe. I'm really interested in this panel's thoughts on is this just another Edward Snowden, and how did this happen again? Did we not learn this lesson the first time? 2, is this a failure of zero trust? Is it a failure of identity and access management? Is it just plain old espionage? I'm super interested in your take on what we could have done to solve this and how we didn't learn this lesson one other time before. And I'm happy to have anybody jump in who'd like to start us off. Anybody want to go first? I'm going to pick somebody. JD's got his mic clicking. All right, here we go, JD.
All right, I'll take first swing at this. But yeah, there is a lot of Edward Snowden kind of similarity. There also, but I don't know about the attribution or the motivation of that. It seems a little bit different. It doesn't seem like he has the ideological kind of bent in pushing this information out. It's also kind of like PFC Bradley from about, Bradley Manning. At the time, Bradley Manning. And that had a kind of a similar motivation that we're kind of seeing, a person that may have ideologically not been driven to push this out, but more along the lines of, curiosity into this and then starting to see that they could push this out and maybe elevate their importance, their self-importance. And that's kind of what we see with this person pushing it into the forums that they were involved in. Now, how did they do that? Again, we are all still digging into this. It seems kind of interesting to me that he was physically uploading documents, and the whole tie into the parents' house, it's a little bit weird to me. Maybe he pulled the documents, this was a safe space to go upload, but you can't scale like that. And we're starting to see signs of that there are a lot of documents out there. And so there's a mismatch right now in the information that we're getting in the public and the information that we're digging into as Mandy and Google public sector right now. There's got to be some other mechanism for the ability to get access to that many documents. And then the third part of that, I would say, is why does this person have access to those documents? We learned from all of these hacks over the last few years that you have to, not only within a big classification arena, you've got to to firewall and to block off people's ability to access certain information within that big range of TSSCI information. You know, we would compartment information within the government when I was in the intel community, and even within a certain classification, I couldn't see what was happening there. And I really needed to know about that case because maybe I had a case that was similar, and so I would have to go and ask for permissions to tap into that compartmented information. So we had a really structured process. But you think about how broadly now security clearances have gotten. How many folks in this community or in this United States have access to classified documents, have access to TSSCI documents? I mean, that's something that we kind of have to look at and figure out a better way to compartment information, to perform better identity and access management, to allow for really scrutiny of the privileges of that certain person, regardless of that area of classification that they have access to. So there are a lot of fundamental questions we still don't have answers to right now on motivation, on how it happened, how far and expansive this damage is. But then there are real fundamental questions on why didn't we figure this out, and why are we encountering the same type of infiltration into something that person shouldn't have access to, and then proliferation of that. So more to come, but it really hit at something, a fundamental process that I thought that we were better at this point. But I would hate to be part of the Massachusetts Air National Guard leadership right now because, they're under a lot of scrutiny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. I think you said it very well, like you articulated it extremely well. It's always going to be a human problem, right? And being able to figure out from a human aspect, like how we can do a better job of monitoring our humans. So to that point, I think we do a really good job of the scrutiny, right, and the compartmentalization and giving people access, but we need to do an equal amount, equally as good a job when we cut off access, right? So through the continuous monitoring process, are we going and looking on a routine basis to see if people still need the accesses that they do? Like, we do all this stuff at the beginning, but do we do it on the back end too? And do we do it efficiently and quickly? So I would just add, like, there's a continuous monitoring aspect to it, and we are always going to have a problem so long as there's humans around.
Sounds right. I'm going to segue and help bring maybe the lessons we could have learned from that experience to something that maybe small and medium-sized businesses can apply. So I'm interested in the panel's thoughts on that. Sounds probably very exotic if you're a bank in Reston or a small business owner. What are some tangible recommendations or advice you might give to a small or medium-sized business that they can learn from? Is it people problems? Is it technical problems? What kinds of advice might you give to those folks? Either one of you want to jump into that one?
I guess I can start off a little bit.
You bet.
So I think one thing that we often get in front of is just understanding what's important and why we're trying to protect it. So I think when you're a small business, a medium business, you probably can't do everything. So first understanding like what's most important, and then how you can go about one, identifying who should have the access, and then two, like monitoring that. That's one of the amazing things, right? Is if you've been at a company for a while and you've switched roles, a lot of times there's not a good way to say those permissions they had, they don't need anymore, and now they need these permissions. So you kind of end up getting permissions and it's always permissions and so 4 or 5 years in, 3 or 4 roles, and you're like, why do I still have access to that? Mm-hmm. So one of the things we did at Mantech in our Zero Trust rollout was that linking of job roles and permissions, and the ability to track that and have a single source that we go to have the authoritative record, so that as you move, those authorities change and those permissions change and your rights change as you go throughout your career there. So it's not permissions end anymore, it's minimum permissions that you get that are related to your job role.
The way cyber warfare has been in the last 10 to 15 years, it's been very human driven. You use a tool to either get into that network or drop in a file that then gives you persistent access, and then it's a chess game between people, and we've seen it again and again. go against the Russians, go against the Chinese, the Iranians, the North Koreans, there's usually another person on the other side of that that we are playing a game of chess against. That's really no longer the reality. Now you are seeing the attacker start to move in certain bits of AI that are machine driven without a human being in the loop. We are doing the same thing on the defensive side. We are trying to automate a bunch of those processes to get ahead of them in terms of the speed to react. So there's a lot of potential here. There's also a lot of risk and a lot of concern, because if that attacker can get to the point where they automate a lot of their processes, in fact, most of their processes, think about how difficult it's going to be able to stay ahead of that attacker. And if you can use a machine making machine speed decisions at each juncture in that network and moving without having to stop, assess, and you have almost a system where you cannot be porous at any point in your network. You have to be able to secure every part of your network against a real robust attacker like that. Now, are you all going to face that robust attacker? I hope not. I don't think so. But that's kind of what we're dealing with at the nation state level right now, is speed of the attack, getting ahead of the attacker. And they're using a lot of that Bitcoin money that they've gotten from ransomware attacks and to put it into developing their own AI, offensive cyber AI. So that's a big concern, and it'll be pervasive across any industry, whether it's critical infrastructure, healthcare, financials, government. So that's a concern, and we're trying to get ahead of that right now.
Awesome. Any other thoughts from the panel on that intersection of AI and ML?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that my title has cognitive cyber in it. And so we started focusing on that over 3 years ago. So it was kind of, we recognized the capabilities that the machine was going to bring that augments the human capabilities. And then how do you bring those together? Cyber defense is a great aspect to it, right? So how do you identify and then bring up the information, or even take action on the information without having to bring it up to an analyst, right? I think that's the goal, that's a hard place to get to. One, from the business process standpoint, a lot of people just aren't comfortable with that. Like, think about history, right? We went from IDS to IPS, but IPS, where it actually takes the action itself, never really took off because everybody's like, I don't really trust it, what's it gonna do? And as we look at large language models and the capabilities just advancing exponentially, I mean, yes, it's going to come into cyber. Like, the cyber is one of the first places that a lot of these technologies have historically become useful, right? And especially when you think about the fact that you can use them for, say, criminal purposes and to get more Bitcoin. If there's a way for somebody to leverage them to be able to do what they can do easier, then they're going to leverage them to do what they can do easier. So then, as a defender, how do we think about those creative uses? Because I think a lot of times on the defensive side, that maybe not being as creative is where we kind of fall down a little bit. Mm-hmm. So we think, oh, we're going to put this new thing in and it's going to solve the problem. Well, unfortunately, like, it's an existential problem for the attackers, because if it stops them from being able to accomplish their objectives, then they can't do anything. They can't make money, right? They can't get Bitcoin, etc. And that's not good for them. So they're going to find a way to do something else. And that constant cat and mouse game, human versus human, that type of thing, it probably will get elevated to the machines. Mm-hmm. And then who's going to have the best capability for them? Like, it's Terminator, right? That's where we're going to end up. Hopefully not. But like,
there's your quotable moments, Steve.
Yeah. If you think about it, I mean, we've seen it in the movies.
Glad I didn't say that.
Very good. Awesome. Nicole, I have a question for you. I want to repersonalize a rather heavy topic, which is to say that I think you can see why I've invited these really incredible minds in this industry to this panel, and just how interesting these folks are, and the topic is. I wonder how you built your body of knowledge. Are there things that you're listening to, things you're reading? What are you consuming that gets you to the place you are in your industry today?
Okay. I'm an avid reader. Anybody that wants to have a conversation about books afterwards, see me. I love reading. But what I think is really important is to channel my reading. I wasn't going to say this, but one, I think that reading different things or seeing different perspectives is going to give you different perspectives, right? So always reading what you like, but then going and doing things that you don't like as well, so that you can see different perspectives from different people. The best way that I can keep up to date is I love having conversations like what we've done today in this networking. I think that this is a really great, I got an opportunity to see how I was connected with people already before I even got into the room. The thing that I do that's super helpful for me is just listening to podcasts, right? The CISA alerts that come out every day and then CyberWire are really good. They're long enough for me to go on a quick walk and then come on back and then have updates. So those are the things that I do to stay up to date, as well as reading kind of like just the general news. I try and read the titles of the things that come in my inbox, and then I zoom in as I need to. So those are the big things that I do.
Awesome. Staying in pop culture, TVs, movies, books, etc. Has anybody ever seen anything that's publicly available that properly portrays a cyber professional? We have seen hoodies, keyboards, green screens. Is there anybody here who has anything that they can say is that's what it looks like? That's a day in the job of a high-end cyber professional.
I'd say Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible. No, totally 180 out.
I get Apache helicopter. It might make sense if they're dropping cyber. Anything? Literally, is there anything that can properly, like somebody watching in the crowd's like, I wonder what their day looks like. Does it look like anything you've ever seen?
I would say, like, I thought about this, and my kids probably look at me, and you know the Jim Carrey meme where he's like playing God and he's got all these emails he's got to answer, and he's like, "Da, da, 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 da." So my kids probably see me like that. But for me, I think that it's kind of synonymous to the role of a mom. And so while I would hope that I look like Claire Huxtable from The Cosby Show, I probably look like the mom from Home Alone who's like trying to get everybody to the airport in time.
Very good. I'm in sort of getting us close to the Q&A part of this. I'm always...
Hey, Austin, but I don't want to demean like the analysts. So really, there are incredible cyber analysts and just minds that are really going after this fight. And you do walk into an operations center, and I took my kids into one of our SOCs, actually the SOC that when we were right over there.
The town center.
In the town center. We're still in the town center, but we were in a different building. But I took our kids into the SOC, and we had all those pictures of cyber attacks launching here, there. And my kids, they thought actually that we were tracking every single cyber attack and those were live. And I said, well, they're really not live. Those are some stuff that we've seen over the last 6 and 12 hours. But those folks that are heads down right now are fighting against cyber operators globally right now. The people that are all poured around one computer terminal and they're figuring out which way they're going to go next. That is the real life day-to-day mission of one of those cyber responders. And when they get in there on an event, they go hours and hours and sometimes days. And it's like a college dorm during finals week. And they are just going nonstop. They have such a passion to figure out what's going on to get these guys out of the environment, limit their access. And so you probably won't see that on a TV show, or they won't make a movie about that. You won't see Tom Cruise, being a cyber warrior in front of a terminal. But it is a pretty interesting field, and just a really incredible passion that they have and they bring to this world. So.
I love it. This is sort of my last question before we hit Q&A. I'm interested in hearing if anybody has an unusual or surprising story that's shareable in a public venue. For obvious reasons, we have public access here, recording in the back. Are there any unusual cyber stories? Anything that people would be surprised to hear about from your work? Anybody have one that you'd like to share, Kyle? I see you nodding.
I'll do. Yeah, I'll do that. So, lots of fascinating things happened in 14 years of Air Force. I'll tell you kind of half a scary story and then a good one. So
Okay.
the half the scary story, I think a lot of people think when they think DoD, military, going back to the media example, they see these large rooms, some cyber commander, watch commander, super advanced technology, everything, very sophisticated. And the truth is it's not. A lot of our critical infrastructure is something that is, actively being repaired and recovered. It's incredible what the folks do every single day to make that happen. So if you look inside of our National Command and Control, there was a project recently where, you remember 60 Minutes, that had this giant floppy disk. These floppy disks were a problem because they were no longer manufactured 15 years ago. And so now there was this crisis for coming in and fixing this across the ICBM force and the things that command the ICBM force. So again, the quick, scary story, we were running out of these floppies nationally. And so there's a big effort to come in and swap this over. And there's some extreme creativity in some places. In Nebraska is where a lot of this directing the nuclear fight comes from. And there are some very secure computers there that plan these war games and ultimately war scenarios. And one of these computers, there's no way to modify it. This is a 50-year-old mainframe, essentially, that's had kind of patch jobs along the way. It had one of these floppy drives as well. And so what the folks did is they built an in-house custom solution. This isn't some large defense contractor. This is airmen on the ground interacting with the system. They built a custom modified, essentially two PCs that were connected to each other so that we're still able to have connectivity without this large floppy disk. They moved to another connectivity solution. And I'm telling that story because I just want everybody to really be serious about looking at how we invest in the cyber positioning of the United States. It's incredible what we've done. There's incredible talent internally, and they come up with creative solutions. And I guess the other fun one, so back to the troublemaker. When I was in high school, we were big rivalry between two teams. And this other team, the scores were pretty even. And there was this, chant that our team would do that we were definitely not allowed to do. The teachers were, no, you can't do that. And so we actually had it set up so the scoreboard was just this wireless system, right? And
I think I know where this is going.
yes, and at the right moment when we scored and we were coming right into the final moments of the game, we actually flipped it from what was going to be our mascot up to this other, and it wasn't anything too off color. But that was just, it was so amazing because the teachers actually, they were fine with it, right? It was a great moment because we laughed, the opposing team laughed, it wasn't against them, but it surprised everybody, and it was kind of a fun moment, just to show how tech can be.
That's awesome. Very good. Anybody else? Any other interesting stories that you might want to share in our final minutes before we go to QA? Any interesting anecdotes? No? All right. Well, with that, if you don't mind, can we give this amazing panel a round of applause? I have about 15 other questions I want to ask these folks that they're prepared to answer, and I'm certain we'd want to do it. But my questions aren't necessarily the best ones. I want to give you an opportunity to ask questions of this team. So with that, if you want to raise your hand, we have a mic that can go to you, and then you can ask this panel any question you'd like. Interesting question. More Terminator stuff. I like it. Who wants to take that one? How about that one for a heavy question? What does an AI battle look like? Or do we expect one?
Well, it's already happening. So Google adversarial banana. And this is a model that basically shows that AIs can be fooled by using certain kind of simple techniques. And it's a scary thing because we have computer vision that are in cars that are keeping us safe or automatically driving us around. We've got the same thing in place where now are these SOAR patterns, like these IT systems and cyber systems that automatically respond to threats. So using that kind of adversarial banana, this thing that looks like a banana, but it's kind of fuzzy around the edges and it breaks the AI. If we can do that to the SOAR systems, and this is happening today, then those automated procedures are now at risk. And so you end up with this, probably right. That's okay. You end up with this race, right, of AI versus AI. And it's an infinite game. It's always going to be the back and forth, demonstrating that we're still just ahead of the last threat that we've seen.
Yeah, very good. Thank you for that question. Great question.
Can I hit that one?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, our government's been doing quite a lot to help out in this space, right? So if you look at what CISA's been doing, like what they've been doing has been great. So they've got the JCDC, they've got their known exploited vulnerabilities list. That's one place I'd start for like small businesses and things like that if you want to prioritize patching. What's on the known exploited vulnerability? You know people are actively using those, so you should probably prioritize patching those. That's a free government resource. Everybody can access it. Depending upon what industry you're in, there may be other government resources you can access. You know, I think about being a DID member. We're big fans of the NSA Cybersecurity Collaboration Center. Like, right, that's huge for the DID. What they've been doing there has been a great model. CISA with their JCDC, with the larger private sector engagement, you know, that's also been a great model. You know, the other thing is look at the reports that are coming out. Like, I think Google just has they have their computer cat report that came out. I forget what the acronym stands for, but it's talking about what they're seeing, and you know what they're seeing is, you know, I think it was something like 41% is credentials, weak credentials. Like, how do you solve that? Well, multi-factor is at least one more step, right? So if you're not, if everything you have isn't multi-factored, that's somewhere to focus, right? Because that buys down your risk significantly. So look at ways, look at where your risk is and how you can buy it down. A lot of times folks don't maybe understand. They spend more money on a smaller risk. Like what, you know, work your problem is big to small, near to far. Your big problem up close is a lot more important than a small problem far away. So kind of set that priority and learn how your spend can buy down your risk most significantly. Multi-factor is a great example of that. And then the other thing that we've seen in the reporting, I think both Akamai and Google came out with reports that talk about this. Using API keys now is becoming a big thing, right? With the cloud and with the way service accounts and things of that nature get access to API account abuse is actually another place to look. So it's not only the traditional mechanisms, it's as you move to new mechanisms, what are your risks there? And then how do you address those and buy down that risk?
Yeah, that's excellent. There's no good cyber panel if somebody doesn't say you have to patch. We would fail if we didn't have that. And if you can't patch and you can't keep up with patching, software as a service or a managed service offering that does that patching on your behalf is critical, because if you're leaving yourself vulnerable, you're waiting for the attack.
Well,
right?
but so again back to CISA, right? With CISA, with FBI and NSA and half a dozen different foreign governments and everything publish their secure by default, secure by design, right? And that could be a huge shift, because if we have that, maybe we have to patch less.
Yes.
Like we'll still have to patch, but maybe we have to patch less. And yes, patching takes up way too much time, and it's a constant, like, as my tech stack expands, that's just more things I have to patch. And then I bring in these new things that are supposed to help with that, but they're just software too. So they're going to have issues, and they're going to have patches, and maybe they're security patches, maybe they're feature patches, but it's always this trouble to try and get up to the current state, and then something else comes out and gets added to the known exploited vulnerability, this and that patch. So I think that concept and maybe pushing out broader in the market, secure by default, secure by design, which is something that we at Adtech have been big fans of for a while. We take that adversarial approach to things and look at, you know, how do we make these things secure so that when they get deployed, they're just like, they're starting from secure. They're not, I have to deploy this and I have to go through this 75-page manual of all the security changes I need to make. And how do I monitor that to make sure I haven't drifted from my standard? And that's where technology modernization helps out a lot. Like, right, that's a lot easier to do in the cloud than it is to do on-prem. Like, how do I have that ATO system, and then how do I do continuous monitoring of that system to make sure it hasn't drifted and it's still within the parameters it needs to be within? The cloud makes that so much easier than on-prem does.
That's beautiful, Steve.
Yeah, that's good. You got to patch. You just got to do it. And it's almost like a table line, right? You got to do it. But I alluded to it before. The human factor is so important. And what is the tone at the top of these organizations, right? Because just like we talked about at the beginning, there's a human, and the humans are going to be the ones that are going to mess us up, right? So what's the tone at the top, and how are you driving security? I think Kyle mentioned it before. It's not just the people that are working technically and doing the technical work to make sure that the patches are there and that they're doing the continuous monitoring. It's the executive at the top that's driving the security message across the board, right? And that person is going to allow people, security is like, I heard someone tell me this before, security is like an acquired taste. It's kind of like fine wine or asparagus, right? You just gotta keep eating it or drinking it, like red wine, right? The more you have, the more you're exposed to it, the more natural it becomes a part of your being, your core, everything that you're doing in your organization. And so if the tone at the top is driving the security message out to the people, not to scare people, but just to help people understand how we protect data, then that becomes the culture, right? You begin to create a security culture that makes people pause before they do something. Pause before they let someone into the, pause before they do, and you're appreciating that pause as you go throughout your day, as you're doing things, as you're trying to, like, I don't know, you're on your cell phone trying to do things fast, and you're pausing before you open up that attachment. You're doing all of those things. Like, most people are not going to intentionally do something, right? There are bad guys out there, but people are doing it when they're just trying to be more efficient. They're messing up when they're just trying to get things done quicker. And so we've got to appreciate that tone at the top, and then appreciate the pause that comes with the human factor.
Love that. Very good. You bet.
So she started stealing your mic. Hey, here's my mic. So I would say a couple other things just based on your business. So if you have a small business that you can't afford to have a SOC, you can't afford to hire these expensive cyber operators, find a good partner that is a managed service provider that hopefully has some expertise in this, and outsource that as much as you can. Because this is a very fast-moving profession and fast-moving game, and certain organizations have the resources to put together a team to be able to do this capably, and most companies don't. And so I would say that's first. Second, you can do the basic rudimentary things like rotating passwords, two-factor authentication, which we talked about, really limiting people's access into certain capabilities. You can do that at your level before you have to go and seek out a real professional managed service, managed security type offering. And then if I'm going up and over to the folks that do have those resources, and we talked about patching, updating, all this. What you're doing though, when you're patching and updating, you're fixing something, but you're also making an assumption that your security baseline has not changed as a result of that. We at Mandiant, we acquired a company, a security validation company, a few years ago, and we thought, all right, well, this will be good for the external market. Let's test it on ourselves. And we realized, here's Mandiant, we had stuff out of our baseline, security baseline, that we didn't realize. We had a couple of technologies that weren't moving and conveying that threat through the system to the SIEM and making a decision on it. It was broken down somewhere. So we were making that assumption as Mandiant. And if Mandiant's making that assumption, most other companies are probably doing the same thing. And so what you're seeing now, these managed service security providers, and what we're rolling out through Google and Mandiant to the full Department of Defense, is security validation, which you can do continuous diagnostics on. They call it the environmental drift of your security baseline. Has it gone out of compliance and out of the range of tolerance that you are expecting? Can you stand up to that ransomware group that just popped a fellow insurance company? Can you stand up to them? Let's test it, and let's go ahead and test against that same threat group. And you can do that again and again and again at machine speed, and using technology that you don't have to pay so much for a red team to come in on a quarterly basis and check out your network and your environment, because that's expensive, and that's only once a quarter. You need to do something every day, because every time you have a security changeover of a shift, you have problems potentially. And so now we have financial companies that are deploying this very quickly, and they do a check every 4 hours. Every time they have a security change, a security shift change, they're validating that nothing anomalous happened to their baseline. So those are just some, I think, a spectrum of options that you have depending on the maturity of your organization and the resources of your organization. But definitely, technology has made you so much more efficient in how you do your business. But a cyber attack that takes down your IP, your product, your brand, can be so devastating, can be the end of your business. So you got to do something, and I would say reach out and tie in with some professionals if you just don't have the resources to do it yourself.
Love that.
Really, that's the premise of zero trust, and that, you know, we used to think about defending a perimeter, a network perimeter, or an organizational perimeter, and we just figured out that that's a never-ending game of whack-a-mole that we just can't win. So the whole zero trust principle is securing data, identifying that person and what they have privileges to, and very much scrutinizing every little detail. And then we built it into, and I was kind of stunned coming over to Google and seeing this, that we had built it into our environment probably 10 to 12 years ago, this concept called Beyond Corp. Now we call it Beyond Corp Enterprise, and we deploy it out to certain companies. And it essentially is doing that zero trust principle. Do not implicitly trust a person's right to access certain material. And do not, and scrutinize every single assumption in your decision cycle. And that's kind of what you have to get to, and that can help kind of mitigate the human factor that is always going to evolve and always going to be, you know, present. That's my take.
Very good. Any last thoughts? All right. With that, I want to, if you don't mind, giving a round of applause. This incredible panel. On behalf of Google, I want to thank the Reston Chamber for this amazing event and the opportunity to sponsor it, as well as thanking personally everybody for the time they spent to prepare for this.
When Cornerstones was established in 1970, its founders recognized that even in a community where people are welcomed and are welcoming, regardless of race, ethnicity, religion, or socioeconomic background, people could work hard and still not earn enough to support their families, that there would always be hungry people or people in crisis. Many in our community are just one unexpected life event away from living in their car or on a friend's couch or on the street. No one plans on being homeless.
My life before, I was the owner of a big pharmacy in Washington, D.C. In August of 2010, I discovered an embezzlement of several $1 million. And by the summer of 2014, I have lost everything. The house and my business. We have yet to leave the house in Great Falls. And in October 4th of 2014, we entered the Embry Riker Center. My first impression was a surprise. It was a pleasant surprise. The people were very, very nice. I got a nice welcome. And we got a nice room. And my biggest surprise was the food. There was a kitchen with 4 ladies cooking fresh food 3 times a day. And my biggest pleasant surprise was my case manager. He provided a lot of love and psychological support, and he explained to me all the services that Cornerstone is providing for the homeless people.
Our comprehensive programs provide stability to people in times of crisis, resources that promote empowerment for moving forward, and hope for the future. At Cornerstones, we meet people wherever they are, without judgment.
Now I have my home. My daughter, she's in school, she's very good. She's gonna go university. My husband, good job working. Now I'm thinking to go to university, to finish my university, and to find good job after that.
Providing stability is only the first step. Where Cornerstones is different from other organizations is in providing the gift of time and resources that continue after the immediate crisis has passed. Cornerstones empowers people to take the next step in what is often a longer journey to well-being through their own hard work and the tenacious support of Cornerstone staff, volunteers, and partners. And we see the difference that makes every day.
I become a citizen and I enjoy the class, and it's helped me also. My English is become better, and I speak better now, and I understand also people when they talking. And after that, I interested and I help her in the class. When I become citizen, I still come every week and help in the class.
When we got the place, the Cornerstone has been extremely supportive to us. They furnished the house because I didn't have anything left. New beds, tons of food, and any supply you can imagine. My case manager came here, brought cleaning things, sheets and clothes and food. So the ladies came here, they fixed everything for us. So it was an easy and very pleasant transition from the shelter to this place. And I'm very appreciative.
These individuals can imagine a future they thought out of reach and can begin to make goals for a better future. Goals we all share for ourselves and for our children. Goals that are possible with the support and partnership that you provide.
Immediately when we moved to the community, we knew that Cornerstones was going to be an excellent partner and build a strong relationship with us. We've been very involved with the organization, whether it's volunteering at the Embry-Rucker shelter, participating in the Help to Homeless walks, and just frankly helping to secure affordable housing for those individuals living in our community. It's such a critical need to build a better Reston.
Cornerstones is proud of the role we play as a participant, convener, interconnector, and advocate, bringing people and sectors together to solve some of our region's most challenging problems. Our readiness program for job seekers has been adopted countywide, and with our business leaders, we're defining the skill sets needed for our current and future workforce. With Reston's Opportunity Neighborhood Initiative, Cornerstones is working along with our partners to see that all children thrive in a healthy start in life and are prepared to excel in school and career. And true to Cornerstone's founders, we believe that our job is to end homelessness, not just manage it, by developing housing that is affordable for people over their entire lifetime. Together with our partners, we have reduced homelessness in Fairfax County by 47%. We remain firmly rooted in the Reston community goals handed down by its founder. We apply the value that all may live, work, play, and serve in the many areas which Cornerstones operates today.
Cornerstone, it's a very, very important organization. Based on my experience, is providing a tremendous help to needy people. And I cannot express in words how appreciative I am for what Cornerstone has provided for me and my son. And most of all is, besides again all the material things we get, is the love and the attention we get from the case management.
It's like I'm become like, now I'm doing things, I'm happy. Yeah.